Hello guys, it's Lauren and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about something that has affected me for pretty much my entire life, as long as I can remember, and that is social anxiety. And I want to be clear before I get into the details of this video that I'm not making this for sympathy or to seem like any kind of victim. It's really more about highlighting a personal experience in case it can help others who also live with social anxiety, need somebody to relate to, need some, just don't want to feel alone. Because I know that when I was younger and even up until the past couple years, I felt very, very alone in this. And it would have been great to be able to, turn on or go to the internet and go to YouTube and see other people talk about their experiences or read a blog about their experiences, which we didn't really have until recently. So it's awesome that we do. And I also think that this could be helpful if you're watching this and you have a loved one who struggles with social anxiety, or you think that they do. Maybe they don't talk about it. Perhaps this can shed some light on what it's like to live with it. And I'm going to mostly talk in this video about my own experience as a kid, as an adult with social anxiety, and kind of how things have progressed for me. I also want to talk about what I use now, like tools that I use to help myself as I work through it. I'll probably make that a second video because I feel like this one might end up being quite long on its own. So if you're watching this like right after I post it, stay tuned. If you're watching this farther in the future, it's likely that I will be able to link to a video below that goes into tips for coping with social anxiety. And I also just want to mention that we have a cute little guest with us today. You can see my dog Lily in the background there. So hopefully she continues snoozing and lets mommy talk about social anxiety. So all right, let's get into it. One thing I want to clarify also is that there is a difference between social anxiety and shyness. So when I was a kid, as early as like first or second grade, I can remember being called the shy girl. That was a nickname that other kids gave me because I was very, very quiet, and I absolutely hated it. And I hated it for one reason because, who wants to be given a nickname like that? Society often equates shyness with meekness or weakness or something like that. I remember at one point a kid calling me, someone saying like, "Oh, go easy on her, she's fragile." Who wants to be seen like that, right? But the other reason was because I didn't feel like that described me underneath at all. From what I understand, from what I have read online, shyness is more of a personality trait. It's more of somebody who perhaps just wants to keep to themselves more, doesn't like to be in the spotlight as much, doesn't want to be the center of attention, and that's just how they are, and that's cool, and that's awesome. For me, and while I can be that way at some times, and I think that we all can, for me it wasn't about that. It was about being terrified of social interactions, wanting to be outgoing, wanting to be part of the conversation, wanting to put myself out there and show my personality to the world, but being held back by my own fears, by my own thoughts and brain and fear of judgment. So I just wanted to make that clarification because they're not the same, and there's a lot of suffering that comes along with social anxiety that perhaps doesn't quite as much come with shyness, and I could be wrong in that. But I kind of think of shyness more as like introversion, even though those are different things too, but it's just not the same. So like I said, social anxiety has been a problem for me for as long as I can remember. I remember being terrified to answer questions in elementary school, middle school, high school. I remember I believe it was second grade, having a teacher getting frustrated with me because she would call me out to answer a question and I would just freeze up and completely not be able to answer. And I think for her, she thought that I was either not paying attention, so I didn't know the answer, or I was just, I don't know, I think it was mostly not paying attention. I remember her saying something about that, like, you need to pay attention. And while that was an issue at some points too, because I have talked about ADD on this channel as well, not the topic of this video, but a lot of the time when I would get called out, even if I knew the answer, I would just freeze up. It would be a sense of panic and terror and not being able to voice what I was thinking. Like I said, I was literally called the shy girl throughout elementary school. People were actually pretty nice to me, so I don't want to give the impression that I was bullied for being socially anxious, but it definitely was demeaning. It definitely, even if it wasn't meant that way, it really made me feel like I was just less than and weaker than everybody else. I would get comments like, why can't you just talk? Or you're so quiet. And while those probably seemed pretty harmless to most people, maybe even a compliment in some cases, to me it was agonizing because it was like, I don't want to be that way. I want to talk. I want to be myself. I want you to see who I really am. So that was very frustrating and led to a lot of low self-esteem that I still struggle with today. Also, as a kid, I remember adults would talk to me and I would just put this big grin on my face and completely clam up. Like they would say something to me and I wouldn't know how to respond correctly. So I would just like be quiet and be silent and say nothing. And I remember going through my head like, you're so stupid, why can't you just say something? But as a kid, you don't really like take the sense to like step back and think about it and think about, just to work through your thought processes. You don't think about that. So that was frustrating for me. Thankfully, as I got older, I kind of got over that. I actually started answering people because I don't know what happened, but I got better at least talking back and being able to do that. Now, another common symptom, I guess you could say, of my social anxiety has always been blushing. This has been one of the most embarrassing things that has caused the most shame and guilt is blushing. And it's so hard to explain because it's a physical response to the anxiety that I'm feeling, but for me, blushing can come on at pretty much any point. So I could be having a conversation with somebody, I could be in a group, someone could ask me a question and all of a sudden I could just flush. Or I could be in the middle of listening to someone talk, but in my brain I'm thinking, I'll have a thought like, oh gosh, am I like listening to them correctly? Like, am I making a weird face? Or do they think that I think they're stupid? Or are they, or if I say something in the conversation, I worry that they think that I'm like incompetent or stupid or dumb. And so I'll just start blushing. And once it starts, especially when I was younger, it would be like, I don't know how to stop it. So, and then you notice that other people see that you're flushing, and then you get even more embarrassed because you don't know how to stop it, and you can tell. It's like literally, it's like we all have thoughts that if other people could hear our thoughts, we'd be embarrassed by them. Of course we do. Or we'd be like ashamed of them maybe, or, we don't want people to be able to hear our thoughts. When you have social anxiety and you have these physical symptoms of your anxiety, it almost feels like other people are able to see what's in your brain. And it's very hard to cope with because you're already dealing with the embarrassment of not knowing how to interact correctly with people or feeling panic or just this horrible sense of discomfort and unease in social situations. So when physical symptoms occur as a result of it and along with it, and other people see that, it's just like a roller coaster that spirals you into this shame and embarrassment. And I think that could probably go along with, shaking. I also will shake often when I'm having to be around people. Like I remember like being in the airport, going through the scanner and like shaking just because I get anxious around people, or like going to the doctor's office. That's a big I also have like anxiety around my health, and I worry about my health too, but it's also some social anxiety, like being around people. I just can't like be at peace and be like calm when I'm around people. And that shows on the outside as well as the inside, and affects how I interact with people and how I respond to them. And it makes it very difficult. That's definitely gotten better for me, but it was really, really a problem in school a lot. And I specifically remember a teacher who really got kind of exasperated with me when I was with some friends in their classroom, like at the end of the school day. And I can't remember exactly what happened, but like they wanted me to say something like a phrase or a word that was funny. because they were like, gosh, you're always so quiet. Why don't you say anything? Why don't you just say this? Just say this. I can't even remember what it was. But I got so embarrassed because in my mind, I was just thinking, I know I'm always so quiet. I'm so stupid. Like, I know I hate it about myself. And the fact that I couldn't just say what they wanted me to say. I mean, for one, I was like kind of pissed off if I really like dug down deep. But when you have social anxiety, you also tend to see everyone else as like way up here compared to you. So you think that they're in the right, at least in my experience, and you're going to do something dumb to look stupid. So I just completely got really, really red, and they were just sitting there like, just say this, just say this. And my friends were laughing. I mean, and I'm not blaming anybody because they just didn't know what was really happening in my head. I am a little bitter still about it, but that's not the point. It's just they made me blush really big, and then I remember them pointing out and saying, like, I've never seen someone get so red over just saying a simple phrase or something like that. While, you know, inside I was like beating myself up and thinking like, I'm such a dumbass, like, why am I so different from everybody else? And I just remember, you know, going home and like either crying or just feeling really numb about this, just feeling so disconnected from the world, because it's like even adults can't understand me. And I specifically remember there was a project that I did in middle school where it was like the coolest project ever, because we had to write something and then we had to make a graphic visual to go along with it. So I wrote about my shell of silence, and I actually ended up turning it into a poem in high school, but I think at first it was just like a paragraph, and basically it was just talking about where I'm in the shell of silence, and the shell is, in the graphic, I made it red, like beet red, and I was talking about how I feel like I'm in this shell and the rest of the world is all around me outside of the shell, and they're having a good time, or they're like living their lives, and I'm watching them, and I want to climb out of my shell and be part of that, but I'm disconnected by the shell, and I can't, every time I try to climb up, something happens and it makes me fall back down. So it's like an interaction that I just don't quite match up. And I talk about bright traumatic crimson, you know, is what shatters my world. And I was talking about blushing because it's like the whole world seeing what's inside my brain. And it was, yeah, it was one of the best representations at that time of how I would feel, and honestly, I'm pretty proud of it. If I looked at it now, it probably wouldn't be as wonderfully poetic as I remember it, but I still think that it was a cool way that my suffering became art, and that's really cool to see, I think. So another way that I would describe social anxiety is kind of feeling like an alien who has dropped into the world and doesn't quite understand the flow of conversation and how it goes, like how to be a human around other people, and just feeling out of place all the time anytime you're around other people in a crowd. Even like walking into a coffee shop, walking into a mall, having a conversation on the phone with somebody, walking into any kind of business and talking to somebody, it's like you feel like all eyes are on you for one thing, like you're this character on a TV show or something, and the camera is right on you, getting all of your facial expressions, so everyone else is watching this happen, and you want to interact with people, but when you talk to somebody or they talk to you, you can't just be in the moment and like focus on that, because you're so concerned with how you look, how others perceive you, what you're going to say that's stupid, what you're going to say that's wrong. And obviously, this is like perfectionism of social interactions. And we all know, or we should know, that perfectionism doesn't work. Perfectionism can be very toxic because it means that if you slip up at all, you're a failure in your mind. And that's how social anxiety is when you're around other people. So it's like you can't collect your thoughts enough just to focus on the situation that's in front of you and act like a normal human being, or at least that's how it is for me. So you put yourself on a stage with every single interaction without giving yourself the grace to just be human. So I want to talk briefly, I mean, that's kind of explaining how it was as a kid, but also now as well. And so as an adult, and I will say that once I got to college, things did get better in many ways. Like I actually started speaking up in class. I was so proud of myself for that because it's like, I like discussions. I like to be part of discussions. I want to be an intellectual. I want to be somebody who like has opinions about the world and talks about them. So college really helped me a lot with that. It helped me kind of like start clean and be more of myself. But then once I graduated college and kind of went into the adult working world, I had quite a few like stumbling blocks with my social anxiety then, because I would, again, the blushing would be a problem in front of my boss. Like if they just asked me a question, I would be beating myself up the whole time. I would blush in meetings and everybody would be looking at me like, what is wrong with this girl? And not knowing how to like work through that is really difficult when you're stuck in some kind of mental situation. And I think this can be true of anything, anxiety, depression, any kind of mental struggle that we're having. If we don't know how to help ourselves, it's the worst, because you feel bad, you feel different, things suck, but you don't know exactly what's going to help you. And the same thing doesn't help everybody, right? And so it wasn't until recently that I started like actually learning how to examine my thoughts and recognize that my thoughts were leading to all of this. The whole time I just thought something was wrong with me. So, it's hard. It was hard working for other people. And I actually, if you haven't followed me before online, you might not know, but I've been I've been working for myself for several years. So it's almost like it can get worse if I don't give myself regular practice being around people, because it's so easy to just isolate myself. When you have social anxiety, being around other people is uncomfortable. It is hard. And yes, it's important to challenge yourself, but it can be very, very difficult if it's your worst fear and you're having to subject yourself to that fear day in and day out, day after day. It's a scary thing. And I have discovered that it does get better the more that you do it, but if you're isolated for a long enough period of time, you kind of start to slip back just to phase one. So it can be a really hard thing, on a day-to-day basis, especially if you're not around people all the time. But also probably if you are, because like I said, I did work for other people for a couple years before being self-employed, and it was hard. So basically, I just want to reiterate that social anxiety is a very real, very difficult condition to deal with, and it can lead to very low self-esteem. It can lead you to just constantly beat yourself up and worry about your place in this world. It can cause you to feel like you don't ever quite belong. And I still struggle with that. I still struggle with times where I don't feel like I quite fit in with the world. And I think we can all feel that way, but a lot of it stems from this. And I think that if we don't talk about it enough and we're not feeling connected enough and understanding like what's going on in our minds, it can lead to unnecessary, generalized anxiety and depression and just having a barrier between ourselves and others. And when you have social anxiety, everyone else holds the power in your mind. You feel like a burden in everyday interactions, and you become a perfectionist about them. And when you have perfectionism in your day-to-day, like when you're talking to people, it can be very hard to get started at all, which is why it can be hard to be around people. And we need to be around other people. That's part of being human and part of being part of society. So that's why I want to talk about this. I will say that the positives, having social anxiety has allowed me to tap into my creativity. It's given me creativity gives me an outlet to talk about what I'm dealing with, and hopefully doing videos like this can actually help other people who are also struggling. So if you found this helpful, please let me know. Please leave me a comment below or give this a thumbs up. More than anything, though, I'd love to get a comment if it is helpful for you. If there's anything else you want me to talk about regarding this, I'd be absolutely happy to. And like I said, I am going to make a video next talking about helpful tips and tools that I use to work through my social anxiety, and that has actually helped me a lot and will continue to help me in the future, I believe. So that's it for now, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, if you like this type of content, like I said, let me know. Hit that subscribe button and let's connect. And until then, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later. Bye.